Steelers head coach Mike Tomlin held a press conference this morning and talked about a variety of things, but two topics I'm going to focus on. One, he talked about the Brandon Aiyuk trade rumors. We'll get to that in the second half of the show, so stay tuned. And also talking about whether or not Justin Fields versus Russell Wilson is a QB competition. We're going to get into all that here in just a moment, but we have an Instagram page here for Verts. It's Instagram.com/@4VertsIG/4VertsIG. So if you search 4VertsIG on Instagram, we will pop up. Same logo as the YouTube channel. We're over 100 followers, trying to get to 200 as soon as possible. Daily posts, reels, DMs are open if you want to ask any NFL or college football questions to myself. So check us out over on Instagram, and of course, subscribe to us as always here on YouTube. All right, let's talk about the QB competition, which Mike Tomlin said, quote, "It's absolutely a competition between Russell Wilson and Justin Fields." Now, I think this offseason for Pittsburgh has kind of been Russ is the starter, but we're open to Justin Fields pushing Russ and potentially winning the job at some point, even if it's not week one. But I think this little calf issue that Russell Wilson suffered right before training camp, and with Fields putting together some good practices, I think that's had Pittsburgh readjust some things. Now, Russ is still the starter. He was listed as the starter on their initial depth chart that came out. So I think he's in pole position, as these teams like to say. But I think there's an opportunity for Fields to win this job by week one, or at least early in the season if Wilson does struggle. I don't think Pittsburgh is or should be in a situation where they just give Russell Wilson the job, especially considering how he's played the last couple of years. Now, the plans for Pittsburgh on Friday night against the Houston Texans in their preseason opener is for Justin Fields to start. Russell Wilson's not going to play. They've been ramping him up. He's been getting more reps at practice, but with that calf, they're going to hold him out. And listen, if I'm Justin Fields, and Mike Tomlin said what he sees during the games will carry more weight than practices. If I'm Justin Fields, I'm licking my chops and I'm trying to ball out, especially in a game where Russ isn't going to play. You go out there and put on a clinic on Friday night, the pressure really ramps up on Russell Wilson. I guarantee you he's going to be pushing to practice full throttle and play in the next preseason game if Justin Fields goes out there and light it up. And listen, you guys know where I stand. If you haven't watched this channel until now, I think Fields should get every opportunity to win this job. And if all things are equal, I would start him over Russ. I think his ceiling and running ability just gives you a better chance to have a high-octane offense that it does with Russell Wilson, who's kind of become more of a dink and dunk guy. I'm sure they'll try to bring back some of his downfield throwing in this offense this year with Arthur Smith and with George Pickens and potentially Brandon Aiyuk, who we're going to talk about. But the Steelers are trying to win now. They don't owe Russell Wilson anything. If they think Fields gives them a better chance to win, that should be the starter. Whether or not they'll do that, that remains to be seen. But that is my take on that situation. Now, before we get to the Brandon Aiyuk stuff, which is really heating up, subscribe to us here on the channel. We've crossed 1,200 subscribers. Would love to get to 2,000 as soon as possible, definitely before week one. You guys have been incredible watching our content, sharing it with friends, and please continue to do so. We're trying to grow this show, NFL coverage, college football. I know it's been a lot of Aiyuk stuff recently, but that's the biggest story in the NFL, and we're going to cover the top storylines out there in addition to doing some other types of content. So continue to show love, support. I appreciate it. If you subscribe, it's 100% free. Okay, let's talk Aiyuk. Is he going to be a Pittsburgh Steeler? Tomlin was indirectly asked about Brandon Aiyuk. He can't comment officially on players on other teams, especially regarding their status on if his team, the Steelers, is trying to pursue him. So, he has to be careful with his word choice. But he first was kind of asked, hey, have you had any interesting phone calls this morning? And he said, nah, it's a little early on the West Coast. So it's like, okay, he's clearly talking about Brandon Aiyuk. And then he said this when asked, hey, are you guys looking for a wide receiver? And he said, I'll let you guys speculate on that. And he kind of gave the patented Mike Tomlin smile. They want him. It's pretty obvious where this thing stands. And look, I appreciate Tomlin for saying as much as he can say that he's allowed, because We all have the internet. We all keep up with what's going on. At minimum, the rumors are hot and heavy about this being a possibility. So why go into, classic coach speak and just, we're just going to talk about the guys are here. So I appreciate Tomlin for doing that. And now we kind of see where this thing goes. The latest reports around Aiyuk are this. The Patriots are apparently out. I don't think Aiyuk wanted to go there, wouldn't commit to an extension, so they decided to pull out, which leaves the Steelers and the Browns as the two reported teams that are interested. Now, all indications are that Brandon Aiyuk wants to play for Pittsburgh if it's not San Francisco, like if the Niners don't offer him more money. I have said it. I will continue to say it. I would rather trade with the Browns if I was the 49ers, especially if I can get Amari Cooper back. Because, sure, he's a little older. He may not block as much as Aiyuk does. But my passing game doesn't take a major hit if I go from Brandon Aiyuk to Amari Cooper. With the Steelers, what is that trade? What will the 49ers get? Because I need a win-now player if I'm John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan. I'm trying to win the Super Bowl right now if I am the San Francisco 49ers. You trade Brandon Aiyuk for some pick-centric trade and maybe a minor throw-in player like a Calvin Austin or even a James Daniels, that's just not moving the needle enough for me. Like, you can't be thinking long-term right now if you're San Francisco. You got to think about this year. And sure, you could say, well, shouldn't they just pay Brandon Aiyuk what he wants? Yes, to an extent, but they also are a run-first team, so it's like I understand that they don't want to completely break the bank with him, but you also can't lose this year in this window of Super Bowl opportunity. Not saying they have no shot without Brandon Aiyuk, but you trade Brandon Aiyuk for like a 2 and a 4 or something like that. There's chatter they may not even get a first. I mean, that's pretty rough if that ends up being the case. So what happens next? Well, I think there's a few questions that need to be answered. Do the Steelers up the ante on their trade offer? Because as of filming this, no deal is done, which would indicate the Niners aren't cool with what Pittsburgh has offered up to this point. Do the 49ers just settle and take pennies on the dollar, which at this point, it does feel like they're not going to get top dollar. They turned down first-round offers before the draft, it sounded like, and there was another report that back in May, the Steelers offered a first-round pick for next year, and they didn't take it, and that now they may not be willing to do that. If I'm not getting a win-now player, I got to get at least a first-round pick if I'm San Francisco. And then the last question is, look, does Aiyuk have a change of heart? Does he take more money and stay with the 49ers, or does he just play this fifth year out? Maybe they can work out something I proposed yesterday, which was, hey, give me a pay raise for this year. We'll revisit it next offseason. Doesn't seem like it's going to go that route, but could there be some sort of change of heart from his side of things? Let me be perfectly clear. If you're a 49ers fan, if somehow John Lynch were to watch this, if you trade Brandon Aiyuk and don't get a first-round pick and don't get a meaningful player to help you this season, and James Daniels, decent starting guard, Calvin Austin, gadget player, they're fine pieces. That's not what I'm talking about. If you don't get a legitimate piece in return, like Amari Cooper would be legitimate, if Pittsburgh fleeces you for like a 2 and a 5, I'll lose a little respect for the 49ers. You cannot take that deal if that is what's on the table right now. I would rather call Brandon Aiyuk's bluff and risk him sitting out games, because guess what? If he sat out all season, nothing changes. Like, the contract just rolls over into next year. So I'm not saying you want it to get ugly between yourself and Aiyuk, but taking a 60 cents on the dollar trade just because you're tired of this when you're trying to win the Super Bowl right now, that's just bad business, man. And I can't do that if I'm John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan. So we'll see where this goes. Steelers seem confident that this thing is going to get done. But, man, if I'm San Francisco, you have been knocking on that doorstep for years now. Don't trade Brandon Aiyuk and not get a legitimate piece back for the 2024 season, because that hurts your chances of winning a Super Bowl pretty significantly, in my opinion. All right, that's going to do it for today's episode of Verts. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Give us a follow over on Instagram as well. Verts IG is the handle. My name is Harrison Graham. See you guys soon.